you are sitting somewhere right now. Same place you sat yesterday. Same walls, same address, same bed waiting for you tonight. This feels completely normal. But for 95% of human history, this was impossible. No human had a permanent home, no fixed address, no place they called theirs forever. They moved constantly, following food, following seasons, following survival. And then, roughly 10,000 years ago, they stopped. They planted roots into the ground, built walls around themselves, and never truly left again. The question is why? Because the answer is not what you were taught. It was not progress. It was not a choice. And for the people living through it, it was not an improvement. Before the switch, life looked nothing like what we imagine. Hunter-gatherer bands were small, typically 20 to 50 people, everyone known personally. Studies of the Hadza in Tanzania show adults spending roughly 4 to 6 hours per day securing food. The rest of the time was theirs, not owed to anyone, not traded for wages, just theirs. You moved when the land told you to move, you followed herds, tracked seasonal fruit, found water. When one place was exhausted, you picked up and walked, no mortgage, no landlord, no lease. The entire earth was home, and no single piece of it owned you. So why did that life end? Here is what most people assume. Humans discovered farming, realized it was more efficient, and chose a better life. That story is almost completely wrong. The real answer starts not with a discovery, but with a pressure. Around 12,000 years ago, the climate began shifting. The last ice age was ending. The massive herds that had fed human populations for millennia began disappearing. Woolly mammoths were dying, giant elk were gone. In some regions, particularly the Fertile Crescent in modern Iraq and Syria, wild cereals like wheat and barley were growing in dense, reliable patches. People noticed. They began harvesting these grains and carrying the seeds. That small practical habit would change the species forever. Here is what nobody tells you about early farming. The first farmers did not choose it over hunting and gathering. They used both. For thousands of years, humans were somewhere in between, planting small gardens near seasonal camps while still hunting, still moving. But grain has one property that changes everything it touches. It stores. You can stack it, dry it, eat it months later. Stored food means you can stay. You do not have to follow the herds when you have grain in the ground and grain in the jar. So people stayed a little longer. Then a little longer still. And then something irreversible happened. The population grew. When you are nomadic, you carry your children. A woman in a hunter-gatherer band spaces births roughly 4 years apart because carrying 2 young children while trilling is physically impossible. The moment you stop moving, that constraint disappears. Births came faster. Villages expanded. And here is the trap that closed around them. More people require more food requires more farming. More farming requires more people to stay and work. Within a few generations, there were too many mouths to feed through hunting and gathering alone. The old life was not abandoned. It became mathematically impossible. This is what archaeologists call the agricultural trap, and the skeletal evidence confirms it was exactly that, a trap. When scientists compare the bones of late hunter-gatherers to early farmers living in the same region just centuries apart, the contrast is disturbing. Hunter-gatherer skeletons are tall, dense, well-nourished. Early farmer skeletons are shorter. Their bones show nutritional stress. Their teeth are riddled with cavities from grain-heavy diets. Their spines show damage from repetitive motion, the same motion every day, season after season. Plowing, planting, harvesting, grinding. Individual farming lives were harder, sicker, and shorter, not better. So, why did it spread? Because it was not about the quality of individual lives. It was about numbers. A farming village could sustain 10 times the population density of a hunting band. Individual farmers lived worse, but there were vastly more of them. Hunter-gatherer bands did not choose farming. They were absorbed, displaced, or simply outnumbered over generations. The farming way of life spread not because it was chosen, but because it could not be resisted by societies that had already fallen into its logic. And with settlement came something entirely new to human experience: ownership. When you move constantly, possessions are a burden. No nomadic band accumulates more than it can carry. But when you stop moving, plant seeds in the ground and build a structure over your head, that ground becomes yours. That harvest becomes yours. And if it is yours, it can be taken. And if it can be taken, you need walls, weapons, and people willing to use both. The concept of property, which feels like a basic fact of human life, is actually roughly 10,000 years old, born directly from the moment humans stopped walking. From property came hierarchy. Some families accumulated more land, more grain, more animals. Surplus required management. Management required authority. Authority hardened into class. The flat structure of hunter-gatherer bands, where status was earned through skill and generosity rather than inherited, collapsed. Kings, priests, landlords, and slaves all appear in the archaeological record within a few thousand years of settled agriculture, not as anomalies, as logical consequences. And then came work, in the modern sense. Hunter-gatherers did not have jobs. They had tasks, shared, varied, assigned by no authority. The idea that your time belonged to someone else in exchange for survival was born from the fields. Once surplus food could be stored and controlled, human beings became a resource to be organized. Armies, temples, and cities required constant, compelled labor. The employer, the time clock, the work week. These are not natural features of human life. They are inventions, consequences of a chain that began when someone stayed near a wild wheat patch instead of moving on. The bones tell us what nobody wants to hear. The most common human lifestyle for 95% of our existence was movement, variety, deep social connection, and abundant leisure. Our bodies were shaped by 300,000 years of walking, varied physical work, and rich bonds in small groups. The settled, scheduled, ownership-based, work-dominated life we now call normal has existed for roughly 1/10 of that time. And the evidence from bodies living through that transition suggests it was not an upgrade. We did not stop being nomadic because it was better. We stopped because we could not stop stopping. One season became two. Two became a village. A village became a population too large to move. And that population became the world you were born into, one that feels permanent and inevitable and correct. But it has only existed for the smallest fraction of human time. And somewhere in your body, in the restlessness at your desk, in the pull toward open land and small groups of people you actually know, the older version of you is still there, still walking, still looking for what comes next, just beyond the next hill.